I was shot by Sherman. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to all Akim out there pushing the word. It's going to go into the third kingdom in the book of Daniel. The first kingdom, which the head of gold was Babylon. The second, which was the silver, represented the Medo-Persian Empire. So now we're going to go through the which is Greece. And we're gonna go through the vision of Daniel. I think the division is what, Daniel 2. I'm mainly gonna go into Daniel 8 through the Spirit. And they all echo the same thing. Whether you go to Daniel 2, Daniel 8, all throughout Daniel's prophecies of the third kingdom, it's all the same kingdom, which represents Greece. But the previous video I did, which we're going live on this brother's channel, but I did a lesson with the brother. Fellow brother in the camp, and we was doing the Persians and the Medes, and the Medes domination in the Middle East, and how they basically took down the Israelites, and eventually they fell to Greece. And if I'm not mistaken, it was what, Darius III that fell to Alexander the Great. So this is the continuation of that the story. So I'm gonna read this Daniel 8 and 2. And I saw in the vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Right, and that ram represents the Persian and Mede Empire, the joint empire, and the one horn that's higher than the other was the Persians, because the Persians actually took down the Medes and they ended up running over the Medes. But what made them different is they were basically in a form of alliance. The Medes had a so-called separate sovereignty, but it was still connected, like America connected with the EU and NATO. You have what they're known as the 7-10 hordes, because it's all one body. Now the EU has its own separate independent practices, but they're still joined one to another, so to speak, joined at the hip. So it says, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, and that represents expansion, domination. Because when an empire comes into power, in most cases they take over the lands that border around them. But it says, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, which is the power, but came to the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes.
Y'all see something on
Yeah,
there?
you got it.
Yeah, okay. Now the he-goat that came from westward is talking about Alexander the Great, which his father, Philip of Macedon, okay, was basically taking over that whole realm. But he had took down his father and took over his kingdom, and he came from the western world to the eastern world and took and had those different battles with the Persian Empire. Because at that time, I believe it was Xerxes' kingdom that was over Persia at the time. Okay, and at that time, the Persian Empire was basically looked at the strongest. They had an actual army known as the Immortals. Okay, but it said that he waxed strong and he became great, and that's what you have in Alexander the Great now.
Which they had a series of battles that took place. If you brothers want to take the time out and watch videos and things pertaining to the many skirmishes and battles they had to actually get to the point of Greece's kingdom and rulership. So continuing on, it says in verse 6, and he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. Right. So Daniel is seeing actually the wars between Greece and the Persian and the Medes. He's actually the first place because he's seeing the vision. All right. It says, and I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him. And that word choler is anger. Because when you go into the history of Greece, just like the brother was going into, the priest was going into, Greece was which Alexander the Great sprang out of, his father had continual wars and struggles with the Persians and the Medes, and he taught his son in the ways of hatred towards the Persians and the Medes. That's why it says he was moved with choler, because he had a undying hatred for the Persian enemies, going all the way back to his father, and more than likely his father's father. You know, they all had they were all adversarial unto the ones that was ruling at that time. So it says, and smote the ram and break his two horns, that's the kingdoms, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Right, so that's when the Grecian rule under Alexander the Great fully came into prominence, and you read that what in the book of Maccabees. All right, so it says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Right, and when you go into the history of Alexander the Great, which is located in First Maccabees, the first chapter, it speaks about how Alexander the Great came into power, and in the duration of time, he fell sick. That were contemporaries unto him, his lieutenants, so to speak. Those are the ones that basically desired the next position of power. And you had, if I'm not mistaken, it was actually five major individuals. It was Seleucus Nicanor, you had Ptolemy, you had Lysimachus, Cassander, and you had this guy Antigonus. Now, when you go into it, the four actually banded together to take down Antigonus, because that was 100 years of history. And after they took Antigonus down, they fought between each other. And that's the main four individuals that's located in the book of Daniel that went and had continual struggles one towards another. And it basically boiled down to Cassander lost his positioning, and Lysimachus, which if I'm not mistaken, Cassander was over Macedon. All right, and Lysimachus, I think he was in the Middle Eastern region, and you had Seleucus in the north and Ptolemy in the south. All right, and after Cassander and Lysimachus basically got swept out, it came the Seleucid dynasty and the Ptolemaic Seleucid Empire, versus the Ptolemaic dynasty. But it's gonna go through a little bit more in the history of it, which that's gonna be later on in the segment, so to speak. But you have anything you want to bring up?
I did, because you had mentioned about Philip of Macedon having a certain hatred for the Persians, and there was those different battles and skirmishes that they had, or that that ill will that they had to lead into him, training up Alexander and then taking over eventually the Persian Empire. This is an excerpt from the book Alexander the Great by Robin Lane Fox. All right, and this is from page 92. So it says war Philip had announced was being declared against the Persians on behalf of the Greeks to punish the barbarians for their lawless treatment of the old Greek temples. He was fighting as the Greeks' crusader. So this when he was, on his come up, and had chosen his slogan for its many subtle overtones. Historically, it referred back to the dark days of 480, when the Persian king Xerxes had invaded and left a trail of sacrilege, which only ended with his sensational defeats at Salamis and Plataea. All right, so he basically was coming back at the Persians to what they did to Greek, the Greeks. All right.
Yep, and that's the choler. That goes exactly into the choler,
which
is Daniel actually saw. The anger. It's a little bit more. Okay. And I'll just read this in First Maccabees. This is First Maccabees 1:1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Shittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Right, and that's Alexander. He reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Continuing on, and had many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. And just like we read in Daniel, the 8th chapter, it said that he didn't basically sit down, you know, and he didn't put that sword down for a second. His whole thing was to campaign, when you go into Alexander's history, to campaign as much as possible and to take down as many kingdoms as much as possible. If I'm not mistaken, he was, what was he, 32 when he died?
32.
I think he had a 10-year legacy.
12
years legacy of just continual wars and continual fightings. And, you know, he took a lot of kingdoms down in that 12-year time span. And even his generals, the men that was under him, they were pretty strong themselves. You know, the representatives, that's why even with Alexander, even the one, his understudies, so to speak, his generals still had a long line of rulership. Like the Seleucids, you had Seleucus Nicanor the first, and Ptolemy. Those individuals, they expanded and they had heavy influence all over the world. Like Ptolemy, you had in Egypt, you have the image of Serapis Christos. You know, you have Ptolemy's influence all throughout Egypt, even unto this day. You know, same thing with Seleucus. You have the land of Antioch, which is after Antiochus Epiphanes. So these individuals were, you know, when they was in a level of power, they wasn't putting the sword down. They were constantly breaking down these different nations. So continuing on, and went through to the ends of the earth until he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributary unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, which is his childhood, and parted his kingdom among them, while he and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so that their sons after that many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Right, and while we multiply the earth, when you go through the book of Maccabees, you see how they ransacked the temples. They pushed the spirit of Hellenization, which Hellenization really first started with Alexander the Great, but they took the style of Hellenization and they built on top of it. And I actually have this book that goes into it, into the history of these different. I'm not gonna go too far into it, but it says in 198, it says Jewish priests on good terms with the Seleucids. So it was a time where the Seleucids and the Jewish priests at that time were actually had a level of agreement, and they had a good term. Tries to force Jews to abandon their law, desecrate the temple, and that's exactly what happened. He didn't attempt; he actually did so. That's where you have the abomination that maketh itself desolate when you read the scriptures. That first abomination represented the Greeks, and that made itself desolate represented how they desolated and desecrated the temple that was.
You have sacrificing the pork on the altars, you know, slaying the Jews and the priests on the altar. It can states that Esau was the fear of the Lord.
Yep.
Same spirit.
A little bit more. It says Judas Maccabee leads the book of Maccabees in the scriptures because this is the most historical book dealing with Greece in the Bible. Because Greece was Greece's main enemies were the ones that were fighting against them on the outside. Simon, you know, the sons of Levitical priests and the other Israelites. Those bring up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got it, bro. Yes.
Yeah, this is from the book of Josephus, right? And this is chapter 5, book 12, chapter 5, and this is at line number. Let's see, I just want to get. Well, I'll start this first part, which is line 237. It says, about this time, upon the death of Onias, the high priest, they gave the high priesthood to Yahushua, his brother. For that son, which Onias left was yet but an infant in its proper place. We will inform the reader of all the circumstances that befell this child, But this Yahushua, who was the brother of Onias, was deprived of the high priest king, who was angry with him and gave it to his younger brother, whose name also was Onias. For Simon had these 3 sons, to each of whom the priesthood came, as we have already informed the reader, which is in the earlier point. So it says, this Yahushua changed his name to Jason. And this is where you get that in the scriptures. Jason was mentioned in the scripture. Now it says, but Onias was called Menelaus. Now as the former high priest, Yahushua raised a sedition against Menelaus, who was ordained after him. The multitude were divided between them both. And the sons of Tobias took the part of Menelaus, but the greater part of the people assisted Jason. And by that means, Menelaus and the sons of Tobias were distressed and retired to Antiochus and informed him. So this is after, when, like the brother mentioned, this is when the Greeks came in and were determined to change the different laws of the nations. So it says, and they retired to Antiochus and informed him that they were desirous to leave the laws of their country and the Jewish or the Israelite way of living according to them, and desired his permission to build them a gymnasium at Jerusalem. All right, now this is the background behind this that scripture. It says, and when he had given them leave, they also hid the circumcision of the genitals, that even when they were naked, they might appear to be Greeks. Accordingly, they left off all the customs that belonged to their own country and imitated the practices of the other nations.
And that's exactly what happened. They started to enroll in the gymnasium, like he said, to be political. Politically correct. That's why when you go towards the time of Yahushua, you fast forward a little bit, you see how the whole priesthood, because the Pharisees really go back to the time of Maccabees, things of that nature, but it became so corrupt during that. The main thing about that time frame is when it became corrupt.
And you see, they had that split there, between different. This brother, this person supposed to be priest.
It started to become a puppet government. And you had it, which
set up.
The term in politics is a satellite state, because when you go in a satellite state, they'll let independence, but they'll monitor them. They'll set up like a leader, maybe a puppet government, or they'll have somebody in the midst that'll constantly monitor them, so that there'll be no revolts or anything of that nature. So Israel was was starting to become a satellite state. That's why during the time of Yahushua, when Yahushua was talking about destroying the temple, not actually physically destroying the temple, but when he was prophesying about the rebuilding of the temple and things of that nature, their whole reaction was to run and tell the Romans, because they were basically being influenced and basically being fed by the Romans. And I just have this term, and I'm gonna go back to it under satellite state. Heavy political, economic, and military influence or control through as Israel. Politically, that's what the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
The king.
Yep. In the form of economics, that's where you had the tax collectors. They were collecting taxes as Israelites from Jake in the Middle East, but they had to pay what? Federal tax unto the Romans. And it says, and also military, because even Jake. To be honest, Jake didn't really have a form of a military even back then. They started to lose their grips and control in all things, but they had a level of allowance from the Romans during that time, and even back then, even toward the Grecians, because it's even parallel when you see how things started to develop and how Rome took that same spirit from Greece, because the brother just read it, on how the corruption became and how Antiochus in all those positions and power. And I have some more of that. If not, I have
that was that.
Yeah, I have this precept in Maccabees. This is 2 Maccabees 6:1. Now, long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers, the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and Gerizim of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. And that's how Israel became strangers. That's why when you read in Acts about where they were worshiping Jupiter. They was worshiping all these different gods during the time of Acts, because this is the inception. This is how things began. All right, verse 3, the coming in of this mischief, and that's how they became strangers and Gentiles, because they started to it started to forbid the laws, statutes, and commandments that they were guided by their ancient world practices. It says the coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people. Verse 4, for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles who doubted the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or if I'm not mistaken, that's feast. But it says fast right here, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So if they didn't profess themselves to be Jews, then what were they professing themselves to be?
Right, exactly. And that's the whole thing with the mission with the other nations, or the Gentiles. The fact that you have Israelites scattered among the other divided between, should we, follow this priest and his, then they got the gymnasium and everything. So how many more Israel, like, you gotta imagine how many Israelites were following behind these men. And then it said one portion followed this man, but then the greater portion followed this man. Okay? And that influence went to other Israelites that were already out there in the nations just living. That's where wisdom comes in, man.
Yeah, because I'm looking at this list. I have a timeline with brothers. You could actually Google the Grecian or the Alexander the Great to the Seleucid timeline, and from Alexander is around 336 BCE all the way to 116 BCE, which is Antiochus, if I'm not mistaken, the ninth Cyzicenus. That was like the whole span of Grecian rule. So that was over 100-year influence. It takes like how many generations to confound the people. You gotta think about Jake. When we came here in the 1600s, 1800s, we fully lost the culture of being Israelites, man. Think about now, 400 plus years. Majority of Jake doesn't even believe they're Israelites.
Yeah, right. So many other, corruptible philosophies out there by now. For our people to say that the Israelites is far fetched. That's where you get this guy Alton Johnson from. Because Jake just has been saturated with so many other ways of life. If it doesn't fit their spirit, then they're not gonna follow. And the thing about it is, being an Israelite didn't fit Jake's spirit back then. So how much more now?
Yep.
Jake was always rebellious.
Yep.
I got a precept too that to give you.
Okay, a little bit more. Verse 7. And in the days of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of batches was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus, carrying ivy, which that's a symbol of Bacchus, the ivy leaves. And even when you go into ancient Greek history, you look at the pottery, you'll see Jake butt naked. They'll have black images.
They have the little wreath around their head.
And they'll have the wreath around their head, and you see them wrestling and celebrating to Bacchus, that god. So they was worshiping Jupiter. They was keeping Olympics. They was worshiping Bacchus. They became full-fledged Greeks.
That reveling spirit. That's where you get Mardi Gras and all that. All them the party spirit today.
That's right.
Clubs and stuff.
It says, moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manner of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. So you had even in the land of the Middle East, which the Seleucids were taking over, they was being heavily influenced by Hellenization. And even when you go to Egypt, where Ptolemy was, you had Serapis Christos. You had the Grecian influence under Ptolemy over there. They were being confounded by because it was just two different styles of Grecian influence in both of those kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
One was more so one was heavily idolatrous, which both of them really were, but it was the level of idols that they would push mainly on the people. You know, because even when you go into Jake, it was a big bulk of Israelites that lived in Alexandria,
Yep.
Egypt, also.
Mm-hmm.
So they were basically being jacked up on both sides of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, I think that's really the main point. I'll read this last verse 10. For there were two women brought who had circumcised their children. They had openly led round about the city, the babes handing out their breasts. They cast them down headlong from the wall. That's really the main point, but it was, like I said, it was forbidden for us to keep our ancient world practices, and we start to be separated from our culture and ultimately from our power. But you got it.
Yeah, and that's just the the result of leaving Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. You know, and back then we knew him as Yahweh. You know, and our people, like I said, our people have always been rebellious. They've always had that spirit of not following their own ways, but following the heathen.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing about us even having a king over Israel, went back to Jake wanting to follow the heathen.
Mm-hmm.
Went back the Israelites want to follow the heathen that were around about them, the other nations. So our people have always had that spirit, man. All right. So now this is a real quick precept. This is Psalms 106 and 34. It says, they did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord came.
And learn their work from the culture influence. Even like today, you see Jake all throughout the universities and even the school system. That goes back to Greece. How the school structure was designed, philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go into Greece,
arithmetic and all that.
Yeah, the arithmetics and all that. When you go into Grecian culture, the main things that they pushed in Greece was philosophy, was sports, was idols, revelings, all these. It was a lot of things that Greece had. The theater style of viewership, entertainment, all which was amusement, distractions. All these things came out of Greece, plays and things of that nature, and it traveled, of course, to Rome. And you see today, you see Jake. Jake main thing is to be a actor. Jake want to be either in sports or acting. That's the highest paying roles. These NBA players, these basketball players, football to Greece.
Yeah, and they go back to these colleges, all these fraternities and stuff. All that's Greek, Alpha, Kappa, Alpha.
That's why they have what, an alma mater.
All that goes back to with alma mater. That's one of the idols. And that's the spirit that Israel has always been in. Just follow after what everybody else is doing. That's why in the law, one of the laws, 613 laws, is follow not a multitude to do evil. So if you got these group of Jakes going the wrong way, you're supposed to be like how Matthias and Judas and them were, and follow the laws of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. But they were influenced by who? By Esau.
Yep.
You had like today you got all these these like I said, actors, plays, and movies. Jake want to be an actor. They want to be an athlete. The top runners in the world are Israelites. Okay. Long distance jumpers. Okay. Discus throwers. All that goes back to the kingdom of Greece.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
6 it says, and they served their idols, which is the idols of other nations, which were a snare unto them. Okay? And this snare under you Jakes out there to worship these other idols, man. To be into America, okay? Like you got American Idol, all right? Because that's the elites pushing that witchcraft and that spirit on you to want to believe in this place, man. Okay? They want to sell out for millions of dollars or to go into the military, okay? I want to go into the rap industry and rap and all of that. That's the spirit of these nations, man, keeping your true spirit subdued and held down, man.
Yeah, because these nations were all about psychologically breaking down Jake to keep them under that, like Hellenization.
Okay, yeah, we good.
Bro.
Okay.
Yes, like I was saying, it wasn't just a so-called black thing. it was really the whole world. You know, the whole world was being heavily influenced psychologically through being psychologically programmed through the Grecians, man. You know, and it's still going on even unto this day. That's why when Rome came into power, and even America, when they came into power, they captured the programming and the wisdom of the ancients of Greece and of Rome to control the masses of the people. You know, of course, during the time of the Romans, you had Yahweh Shai and the band of men that followed him that knew that at the end of the day, all these things are just a distraction to keep us away from our power. And if we stay in tune and align ourselves with the spirit of our power, we'll be able to break free.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be able to have generate enough power that we will be able to get out of this captivity. And that's why you see so much power that came from these men. You seen angels that fought in the midst of the battles. You know, when you read the time of Maccabees, what's this guy? Heliodorus got his ass whooped by an angel, man. During the time of Yahweh Shai, you had spiritual power that was being presented, that was being shown amongst the people to show if you tap into your true power, this is the result of it. The hell with the things of Greece, the hell with the things of Rome. Worship your power in truth and in sincerity. Because these nations know the influence of our power. That's one thing about it. They go through the accounts. Mm-hmm. That's why even going back to Greece, the Library of Alexandria in Alexandria, Egypt, which, if I'm not mistaken, that was built by Alexander because he was a master scholar. He actually, not only was he a king, he actually went into a heavy scholarship. He knew who the people of the book was. Mm-hmm. And he was even, he even talked to priests. In the book of Josephus, it said that they actually told him that he was going to be that king in Greece that would rule. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So one thing when Alexander came into power, he confounded the truth of who the true Israelites and the Jews were. Mm-hmm. That's why. What did he do? One major thing in Greece is the changing up of the names. Ethiopia, you know, it wasn't no more the land of Cush. It was Ethiop, which means burnt.
Or Ethiops.
Ethiops. Yeah, and you had the land of Japhet was no longer Japhet. It came to it changed to Europe, which goes back to Europa. Mm-hmm. You know, so on and so forth. And the Romans took that same pattern. Asia Minor, was that Leo Scipios Africanus, Leo Scipios Asiaticus.
Right. Yep.
And it became the whole world. That's why you have America, Amerigo Vespucci. All these individuals. You have South America, these different lands of Colombia, goes back to Columbus. All these different names are basically, you get that Psalm 49:11.
Yeah, that's what I just finished.
Were all basically put down by the so-called white man, etched in history by the so-called white man, so that you don't actually know who you truly are, so that you can't really figure out your identity. You got that?
Yep, this is Psalms 49:11. It says the inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. And that's what they did. Like Brother said with the Greeks, even on to the Romans, they started calling the different continents and different countries after their own names, man.
Yep.
You know?
And it tells you that also in Sirach, that the continuing of a city builds a man's name, if I'm not mistaken. So when these different nations came into power, just like the brother was going into, that's how they basically show. Oh, I got it right here. Sirach 40:19. Children and the building of a city continue a man's name, but a blameless wife is counted above them both. So when these rulers came into power, Antioch, these different lands, and the list goes on and on. When you go through to the origin of all these different lands, you see that it was the so-called white man that ruled in these different lands. He just confounded the languages and confounded the land names to confound the masses of the people. Because Esau is all about confusion. All right, history started with the Greeks. So sorcery and witchcraft really started with those Greeks. Though they took that wisdom. Not only did they take the influence, because they had power. They took power from their predecessors, which were the ancient Magi's, the ancient Chaldeans, the ancient Assyrians, the Babylonians, which those were high-level witches and warlocks and they took that, as well as Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
They took that those idols, they took that influence, cultural influence, and that sorcery, and they put it in their realm to control the people. That's why when these different nations took down other nations, they kept a lot of the history, going back to what that the Liberia, Alexandria, Egypt.
Yep.
They kept the history, then the scrolls, the ancient scrolls and things of that nature. And they not only did they keep them, they read them, contained them, and they forbid the public to actually read them. That's why you have even today. They speak about all these different libraries in London or all throughout
in the Vatican,
in America, where the general public cannot have access to go into because it's really deep history. And if you actually go into that, you'll truly identify who you are and identify who your power is. But I want to rewind a little bit back to go back into the main point of who we're dealing with in the prophecy of Daniel. I want to just jump into that. So I'm gonna go a little bit back to Daniel 8 again, Daniel 8:21. So we had to go through all these different things, to go through the rough goat, go through the influence of the goat, so that we could bring all these different things into shed light onto the third kingdom and how impactful it was and why it was known as the goat. Why it had these different names as an inferior material when you go into Daniel 2. It was known as the brass, which brass is inferior to silver. Because even though these kingdoms were stronger, they became more debaucherous. They were more wicked. Right. Pedophilia was heavy in Greece. All this filth and madness was started to become more and more acceptable unto the people, walking around butt ass naked. Right. Like the gymnasium, which goes back to the word gymnos, which means naked, or to exercise naked. So it became that brass. It became more inferior. Continuing on, verse 21 in Daniel 8, it says, well, I'll start at 19. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Right, which is Alexander the Great. That's the king of Greece. You know? So like even when you read certain other scriptures in prophecy, you know, where it mentions especially in the Old Testament, where it mentions Grecia, it's talking about the Edomites, because the first king to reign over that as a kingdom was Alexander the Great. And he was an Edomite. Yeah. Okay. A little bit more. It says now that being broken, whereas four stood up forward, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. That's what we read in First Maccabees. That's right. The 4 generals, Seleucus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Lysimachus. All right. Those generals that were brought up with Alexander and came after him, they were the mini empires, so to speak, you know, or nations that came out of Greece, or what the different nations were up under those 4 different sectors, so to speak. Yeah. You know, and I believe Israel, Jerusalem was underneath the Seleucids. Yeah, and even and it said that they didn't stand up in his power, because even when you go into the history, Alexander actually had a son. If I'm not mistaken, he had 2 of them, but if I'm not mistaken, brothers could go into the history, Cassander actually killed one of his sons because he was supposed to be the heir to the throne. And they made sure that his child wouldn't be so. So they killed his son, they killed Alexander's wife, they basically destroyed his legacy, so that they would actually have, by political and military might, be crowned king. And that's why the war started to be, the scuffles started to become such a big thing. Like I said, it's over 200 years of history. That was a constant war. And what does the scripture say? Satan divided against itself. How shall his kingdom stand? Right. So that kingdom had to fall. And I'm going to read a little bit more. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty,
but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. And if I'm not mistaken, it's talking about Antiochus. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand.
And that's Esau, man.
Yeah.
That's Esau and them in general, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He will try to stand up against Yahweh Shai and he get destroyed.
Yep. And that's how you know we're living in a time of that fourth kingdom, because after Greece is Rome, which Lord willing, you know, the next segment we'll go into the fall of Greece. We'll go into the establishment of Rome and how basically, you know, the kingdoms actually, the kingdom of Greece actually diminished. But I got a little bit more. You had anything? If not, I'll just read this last little bit. Yeah.
Nah. I mean, I was looking for something, but
Okay.
it came to me yet. So.
Okay. Well, I'll just read this real fast. This is Daniel's 11:4. Basically echoing the same sentiment. I'll start at verse 2. And now will I show thee the truth. I'll start at 1. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches shall he stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, which is the scattering of the generals, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. And I just spoke about how his kingdom got plucked up because his son and even his wife got killed. So his legacy basically got diminished. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Right. And Daniel's the 11th chapter goes into the king of the south and the king of the north, which we're not going to touch on. You know, it's a lot of history in itself. If brothers, you know, you get the time, you can go through the king of north and south, which the king of the north is Seleucus, and everybody that came out of his line is Seleucus the first, you know, Antiochus the first, Antiochus the second, Antiochus the third, Epiphany, so on and so forth. Ptolemy, Eugatus. It's a lot of history, you know, when you go into Ptolemy the third. It was just a back and forth scuffles between one another. Then they, you know, mention women, oaths and things of that nature. If I'm not mistaken, the woman that got married in the midst was what, Cleopatra. You know, so like I said, it's a lot of history when you go into it. But you brothers, you know, if you have the time, you can definitely go into it and you know, look into it, because it's a lot of history. It's important, and when you go into it, you're basically reading the book of Maccabees. You'll read that same history. You'll see exactly what happened between these different kingdoms, how they fought one against another. But you had anything?
Let's see here. There's gonna be one more piece, and this just to bring out the fact that, you know, these different kingdoms are all, you know, they all came into power according to prophecy. Okay. This is Daniel chapter 7, and Daniel 7. I started 1. This is in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. And this is what, you know, we entitled the lesson, you know, Daniel's vision. It says, then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Verse 2, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great another. That's the different kingdoms. The first was like a lion and had eagle wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth. That's Syrian going into the Babylonian kingdom.
And that was a major symbol that they actually held in high regard, the lion with the eagle's wings. It's carved all throughout the temples. And even, you know, you'll have individuals that extract archaeology and they'll see that symbol all throughout their you know their architecture.
It says, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Verse 5, it says, and behold, another beast, which is, this is the third beast, a second like to a bear. So like this, second beast, and it raised up itself on the side, and it had 3 ribs, which is the Persian Empire, and the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. That's the Persian Empire. And this is the point, verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it.
Read that over.
Verse 6. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard.
Yeah, and this is when you go into the image. That's the leopard.
I think he got a pelt on the horse, a leopard pelt. That's Alexander.
That's
There's a
Alexander,
pelt on the horse.
and he was known to wear that rock the leopard skin clothing. He thought very heavily of that leopard attire. That was something that he embraced tightly, and he knew he was that third kingdom, man. Just like Nebuchadnezzar knew he was that head of gold. Continue.
It says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. Right, meaning that kingdom was over all the known world at the time. Whatever direction you went, which the brother read that earlier in Daniel 2, wherever the he-goat went, it touched not the ground. So wherever, Alexander was, the clan was part of the kingdom of Greece, it was so. It says the beast also had 4 heads, which that's going into the 4 generals, Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. Okay, so those were like the 4 heads after Alexander had died, and we read that in First Maccabees, the 1st chapter. It says, and dominion was given to it. So that's the third kingdom. Okay.
Yeah, we read the dominion, the influence of the dominion, how far they took it, because they took it far. It wasn't just, all right, we in rulership, let's give the people peace. Just like during the time of the Persians and the Medes, it was a horrible kingdom. It was wretched. At least the Persians and Medes allowed us to build the temple. They gave us grants and gave us rights to reestablish our own during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. We didn't have to fight against Cyrus. We didn't have to fight against Xerxes and Darius. But we were fighting the Seleucids. We were fighting their generals and their underlings, because this is the establishment of Esau Edom. And Esau Edom always had a relentless and an undying hatred for the Israelites.
Yep, that sword they had.
That sword. And we weren't trying, and the Persians wasn't trying to steal our identity on the whole. They wasn't looking to take us away from our culture and our power. They was basically giving us rights and privilege, so to speak.
Yeah, we're just under tribute.
We were just tributaries.
Only the different satraps and provinces that Persia had, the 127 provinces. But Greece was a whole nother, power. Like it says, when Greece came into power, evils and wickedness multiplied in the earth.
Yeah. And even when you read during the time of the Persian and Medes, you had even women like Esther and Mordecai, Israelites that was in a high position. Even during the time of Babylon, you had Israelites that was in a high position. In Greece, it really wasn't Jake. Jake wasn't really up there, man. The highest position was the Pharisees and Sadducees, but they wasn't really up there.
Puppets, man.
Yeah, they was being puppets and being influenced. But that's really the main point.
Yeah, kind of.
So, this is really the main thing we had, for you, Akim, Lord willing, we'll do a second part, a light segment, just going into the fall of Greece and going into the, so we're going to end it by giving all praise and honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom, Akim.
Shalom, shalom.